Another day, another teardown. Today we're going to take apart this, what I would consider blown up. It's a Core L92 6.2 liter out of an 07 or 08 Escalade or Denali. I just got a huge shipment of engines in. I mean, I'm totally overwhelmed. I've got probably 6 skids of engines. Most of them are LS architecture. I did get another 6.1 Hemi. Got an L86, like a direct injected 6.2, so that will be a cool one. And yeah, got lots of work. But before we get started taking this apart, let's talk about what I do for a living. So I run a full service salvage yard. So we buy cars from the auction, from the salvage pools, from all over the place really, and I sell the parts on the internet, much like most other salvage yards. I also cater to niche markets. That's why I do lots of engine parts, because it didn't seem like a lot of people were doing it. So that's kind of why I'm in possession of all this stuff. We probably do 200 or 300 engines a year, which is probably more than we can handle, but we do it anyway. And we're located in St. Louis. If you want to buy parts, I'm going to put a link for our eBay store in the description. If you want to call us, we don't have everything we have on eBay. We get parts in all the time. It's hard to keep up. Always looking for help around here. But our phone number is 314-502-3104, and we keep normal business hours. Anyway, let's get started and let's check out what we've got here. So here's what we're working with today. And as you can see, this core is pretty complete. It has coils, it has an intake, it has exhaust manifolds. They come in all dressed different. So sometimes they're totally bare, sometimes they're fully loaded and even have harness and computer on them. It really just changes every time I get them in. So I get them from shops. I know a lot of people ask where they come from. They come from shops, they come from other salvage yards, they come from even dealerships on occasion. So I never know what I'm getting until I get a phone call, it's on its way in, or I get an invoice sent to my email. So because of that, I never really know what's wrong with them. I never get a story, I never get the mileage, I never get to know why it's not in a vehicle. But with this one, you can see the pan's not on it and the pickup's not on it. So I'm gonna guess that something is quite unhappy with the bottom end. In my experience, this is a 6.2, and they like to break pistons. I've had a ton of them with broken pistons, like a ton. So I'm hoping that the bottom end is salvageable. I'm not holding my breath. I'm hoping at least to get a pair of 821s off of it that are undamaged. But again, I've seen these where they've blown up and everything is trash. So without further ado, we're gonna get started. We're gonna rip this thing apart and let's find out what's wrong. So I can tell you it is missing a couple head bolts. But before we get into any of that stuff, I'm going to zip all these outside parts off the intake, water pump, the exhaust manifolds, and coils. It's kind of boring to watch somebody do that, so we're just going to skip ahead to where I'm ready to crack the valve covers off. Before we get started, I'm going to take the spark plugs out, and we're going to take a look at those because they may give us some clues as to what is going on inside this thing. So here are the plugs out of this thing. And this one seems to have had a bad day. This is an incomplete plug. The rest of them, complete plug. So I bet we're gonna find an incomplete cylinder. So let's see what we can find. So there are no signs of distress yet. There's no failed rockers. Everything seems to be tight. Nothing, I don't have a bent valve or broken valve spring. So let's go to the other side. Much like the other side, this really hasn't shown us anything. Everything seems to be okay. There's no signs of obvious damage, so let's keep going. Well, that all looks all right, so let's go to the other side. Yep, no major issues yet. So before I peel this head off, I want to point out, as you can see, this had a massive exhaust leak and a broken exhaust manifold bolt. That's super common on these engines. All LSs, Gen 3, Gen 4, it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to break exhaust manifold bolts. You can upgrade the hardware, but I rarely get a complete engine in with no broken bolts. There's at least one or two. So let's get this head off and see if we can find any damage. Well, that's not tight. Okay, well. So this was the side that had the bad spark plug, so I'm pretty sure we're going to figure out what's wrong with it as soon as I lift this head. Piston. Piston, piston, wrist pin. I wish I could say I was surprised, but man, this is just what 6.2s do. I think they start as a small crack, cracks a crown off. I've seen that a bunch of times. So let's peel this other head off and see if it's just one cylinder or maybe it's even worse on this side. And again, these are not tight. Here we go. That side looks complete, and I figured it would because the plugs were all decent on this side. So let's see what else is wrong with this. So let's take a look at the cylinder heads before we get the short block apart. This is the head off the good side of the engine, passenger side. There's no damage here, but it still could be cracked. They like to crack right here between the intake and exhaust valve seats. That's where I see it the most. Usually only on the rectangle port heads, not so much on cathedrals. Here's the driver's side head. This is from front to back. So it's wet, it's got some oil on it. And this was the cylinder that blew up. And I don't know if you guys can tell, I can tell pretty easily, there's not a seat here anymore. It's gone. And I should have been able to tell this when I took the rockers off, but I guess I don't have a keen enough eye. Either way, it's not that I hate Chrysler engines. I definitely don't hate Chrysler engines. All engines can be junk if they're not taken care of. This thing likely got hot, dropped a seat, and exploded. So this head's junk. That's sad. I did hopefully this head here is not cracked, and I can sell some other parts off of it. But let's see if we can salvage the bottom end. But again, not really holding my breath. That's pretty bad. I'm surprised the head of the valve is actually in the right location. Usually when this happens, that valve's bent over sideways or broken off completely. So I've got this engine sitting on its tail, ready to take the windows tray off. And I can already tell that there's pieces of piston here. Right there. And some other loose pieces here. And I can even see a ring in there. Yeah, it's optional. So let's get this windows tray off and see how bad the carnage really is. There we go. Yeah, you can see that windows tray's smashed out. Something wanted out. Parts of piston. Well, I wonder which one is the problem. Yeah, these rods are pretty banged up, so let's get the rods and pistons out and let's see what they look like. So here is the rod that decided to kick the piston out of its life. As you can see, it's bent at the top and the wrist pin is pressed sideways and stuck. These are full floaters, but this one is a non-floater. This one's a sinker. And the adjacent rod is also really banged up. That's trash. That's garbage, but that's not too bad. The rest of them all look pretty decent, but those 2 cylinders definitely trash. We're going to go ahead and get the timing cover crank pulley off, the timing chain. We're going to pull the cam out, and then we're going to pull the crank out and see if we can salvage the block, but I don't have a really good feeling about this. I had somebody ask me what kind of pulley puller I prefer. Well, I don't know if there's one that's necessarily better than the other. This is an OEM Tools kit. Haven't had any issues with it, but again, I don't really think they vary too much. Ha. Okay. Maybe I should slow down. I don't want to break my impact. The oil pump off. The chain tensioner. And let's go ahead and get the cam gear off. There we go. Cam looks alright, but they usually do on these. Usually it's the DoD engines that have absolutely trash cams, but unfortunately these really aren't worth anything, but we'll throw it over here anyway. Okay, time to get this crank out. Come on out of there. Just needs a little tappy tap. Let's go ahead and get this sprayed out and see what we're looking at here. Oh yeah, we're done. Yep, that's scrap. That's garbage. I'll show you. Cleaning always reveals the worst things, and now you can see exactly why this block is trash. That crack goes all the way to the top of the sleeve, and there's an equal dent and crack. It's kind of harder to see from this angle, but it's about the wrist pin's width away from that. So now you can see why this is completely junk and will be getting thrown in the aluminum bin. So the crank also suffered a little bit of damage. Counterbalance is pretty chewed up. Probably wouldn't run this crank. It's not a super hard to find crank, so this will probably end up in the scrap bin as well. So that was pretty catastrophic. Not going to do so hot on this core, not going to lose anything, but yeah, that's just the risk you take when you buy a blown up engine. Sometimes you get a whole bunch of good parts to sell, and in this case I got a whole bunch of scrap and maybe one head. Anyway, I really appreciate you guys watching along. I've got a whole bunch of engines to tear down. My plan is to get one of these videos up every week. That should last me, what year is it? Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.